So welcome to today's Social System Mapping Deep Dive session for August 17th, 2020. Today we're going to talk with Lisa Negstad about human systems dynamics. I'm really excited about it. So your hosts today are Lisa Negstad, Lisa, you want to wave? There she is. And Lisa is an accredited human systems dynamics practitioner. And one thing you'll discover as you proceed with social system mapping is that we understand that social system mapping actually takes sort of three different perspectives to be done to do well. And those are the visionary, the mapper, and the sense maker. We call those three different hats. And so we start to identify ourselves as which hats do we wear so that we can sort of understand where each other's coming from when we're talking about mapping. And so Lisa wears the visionary and the sense maker hats, which means that she can help a network or community think into what is useful and what could be done with a social system map. So that's the visionary role. And then the sense maker hat is what we're going to dig into from one perspective today, which is how to get value out of the map once you've made it. So in addition to Lisa, there's Kara, and Kara is our tech support person and my all-around helper in many ways. So Kara just waved. And then the other person on our call today is Tim. Tim is my partner and co-founder of sumApp and Greater Than the Sum. And I can't see you, Tim, but if you could wave. Are you waving? Yay. Okay, now I can see you. And then me, Christine Capra, co-founder with Tim of sumApp and Greater Than the Sum. So today is the second of our monthly cycle of 3 sessions. The second Monday of every month, we do an on-ramp, which is an introductory level session for people who've never seen a social system map. We usually have unexperienced mappers share their map with the community. So if you haven't seen a map yet, I recommend that you do the on-ramp. And it's a great way to get to know other mappers as well and see what they're working on. So the next second Monday is September 14th. Ben Roberts is going to share his Now What map, which he has been iterating through interestingly over the last year. Today is the third Monday, the deep dive conversation, which, as you know, is combining human systems dynamics with social system mapping with Lisa Negstad. And then next Monday, we're going to have a tech talk. Tech talk sessions, always on the fourth Monday, usually digging deeper into some aspect of the technology of making these maps, especially the sumApp part, and often sharing a feature that is either new or we think is underutilized and should be, more people should know about. So next, the August 24th one, we'll be talking about segments and the custom survey filter. Okay, if you have not seen a social system map and are coming to this with a need to learn what it's about, we won't go deep. You will see a map today. We'll see our community of practice map. We won't go deep into what is a social system map, but I think that given the HSD content, you'll still find it relevant, because I think that what we're going to do really helps us think about the fundamental assumptions of mapping, even if you're not real familiar with the technical aspects of it, I think you'll be fine. But we have a whole lot of recordings of recent sessions, so I suggest that you go back and you can see lots of other maps in those sessions. And Kara has put, I'm trusting she has put a link to this page in the chat. Yes, David, Brenda Oyang, or Glenda Oyang, not Brenda. Glenda Oyang is the HSD person. Okay, so another opportunity for learning is if you get stuck or you just need to talk with somebody about something, I have a half hour every Thursday early evening that I'm just online. So you can just use my link. You can get it in Slack and just jump on and see who else. If it's just me, we can talk through your issues, and sometimes there'll be other people, and it's good to have a 3-way conversation or a 4-way conversation. But at any rate, I'm available 5 to 5:30 every Thursday Central Time. So you can check for cancellations in Slack, and there's a link to our Slack team in the chat now. So if you're not in our Slack and you want to be, go ahead and join from that. So for today's agenda, we're having our greetings and agenda review. In a moment, we'll have some intros in chat and a little poll. And then Lisa will do a short review of human systems dynamics and self-organizing systems. Then we'll look at this community of social system mappers has a social system map of our community. So our community practice map is what we will be using for our example for today. So we'll walk through that really briefly. Then Lisa's got some activities she's going to walk us through. Then we'll have a group discussion. And for those of you who aren't familiar with these sessions, I and Tim and Kara will stick around for an extra half hour. It's optional. So we'll do the hour. That's the formal session. At the top of the hour, we'll have a closure and say goodbye to everybody who isn't sticking around. And then we will just stay online. And if you have questions or more you want to talk about, we'll be around for that extra half hour. Thank you so much. I'm always just heartened to see all the different networks that people are working on and the different issues that they're trying to, yeah, whoa, what a group. Exactly, David. Okay, so Kara, can you, we're gonna do a brief poll just to see where everyone's at relative to human systems dynamics familiarity. So Kara, can you launch the, yes, great, thanks. So you should see a poll in front of you now, and it's just a really quick question. How familiar are you? And let's have you put a thumbs up when you're done on Zoom if you know how to do that. And if you don't, that's yay. Okay. Kara, can you unmute yourself and tell me how many looks like are done?
Yep, we have everybody.
Okay.
Yay.
So, yay. Will you share the results? Okay. So it looks like the majority of people are, like roughly half have maybe heard of HSD but don't know much about it. And most people don't know anything. So that tells us what we need to do in the session. Okay, so you can close that, Kara, and I will go back to sharing my screen briefly. And then I think we're gonna, so we did the poll. Okay, so Lisa, I'm gonna hand it over to Lisa. And
great, thanks, Christine. I didn't actually complete the poll, so I'm excited to see that there is additional HSD practitioners in the room, because I look to you to help me with this. I became a practitioner a couple of years ago and still also feel like a student, as we all are, of systems thinking and systems change and self-organizing systems. So I look forward to this being a collaboration. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's fun to see what a global presence we have here. I just want to do a little introduction of human systems dynamics, and then we're going to just use it to go into sense making on a map. You don't have to know much about it to be able to use it and do the sense making on the map. So first, Christine's going to share her screen, and we'll just show the landing page for human systems dynamics. It is a theory developed by Glenda O. Young. And Glenda O. Young and Royce Holliday wrote a book called Adaptive Action, which is one of the ones that kind of guides the work of this human systems dynamics. And I also want to just say for a minute while we're on the web page, and I also put that link in the chat, is their resources link has a ton of great tools and information. So I really invite you. Everything is open source. They just want you to attribute to them, but you're welcome to use it. And there's a lot of great information there, and there's a lot of learning opportunities there too. So human system dynamics works with complexity theory and looks at self-organizing systems and how does change happen in self-organizing systems. And it's such a great overlay to put on and think about our social system maps. So all the tools of human systems dynamics can really help us, because that's what networks are very often, is that they're self-organizing systems. And when we look at self-organizing systems, what we're doing is having to do sense making in a different way than many of us traditionally have done, kind of planning and sense making cycles, when it's much more of a closed system or there's things that you can predict. In self-organizing systems and in complexity, there's a lot of open boundaries. We're not able to have a linear cause and effect. There's a lot of uncertainty, and we certainly are experiencing that in our environment as well. So Christine, if you could go back to the slideshow. So what we're trying to do is to help work and kind of work in this complexity, is that we look at something called pattern logic. So this is ways of thinking about the different parts of a self-organizing system. And what Glenda kind of discovered in her research and work is that there's 3 different components that come together. So the first one is containers. And I'll kind of dive into each one. The second one is the difference that happens across the system. And the third one is the exchanges that happen within the system. So if you go to the next slide, Christine. So a container is really any kind of bounding condition within your system. Another way to say it might be kind of fences that contain the system, or it could be magnets and affinities that happen across the system. There are many and entangled, right, in a complex adaptive system. But here are some examples that we might see show up as we're thinking about social systems and the maps that we're working with. So individuals that can be a container, different groups and subgroups and teams, values that people hold, or even normative values that a group holds, perspectives that people have, goals, and physical locations. You can see just some examples of containers. So they're a bounding condition that can help in a very unbounded complexity, right? So that's one aspect. Let's look at the difference piece. So difference is a distinction across parts of a system, the things that really show up as tension sometimes when there's a difference, but that is actually where the potential for change is in the system. So examples of that as we think about the social systems on our network maps are different interests, different assets, different expertises or experiences, different cultures, different learning styles, different languages, different roles we have, or those like different kind of things that we focus on, informal and formal power. Again, there's many and entangled number of differences. And one of the things in the systems theory is if you have too little difference, you're not going to have the energy for change. And if you have too much difference, your system will bifurcate, right? It'll split. And so we're looking for the tension and the difference that's significant, like for this moment. And I think that can really help us with the sense making in the maps. And let's look at the third one, which is exchanges. And this is the flow, right? This is the flow of energy, resources, communications, information between all those containers on a map. Again, a lot of different ones, right? So it's a transfer piece. I think that's also another way of saying it. So you can see the examples here as we think again of a social system network map, flow of funding, flow of friendship, relationship trust is a key piece of this. We talk about that in network weaving for sure. Swapping skills, bartering, collaborations, relationships, languages, like just communications, connection. And again, we can look at exchanges that happen between, you know, kind of within different containers, exchanges that happen within different containers, and that can also tell us information. If we have really good exchanges, we have a lot of trust, or let's say we have a lot of good communication, the change can happen faster, and it can be more predictable. If it's pretty loose, if there's not a lot of, it's kind of slow, there's not a lot of predictability, we don't necessarily trust, then the change is going to be slower. That's what the theory says. So let me just stop for a minute. Those C, D, and E, just encourage you to put questions in the chat. We'll try to answer them as we can. But what we're wanting to do is just kind of continue to do a little bit more showing you how this can work for sense making using the community of practice map. We're going to focus on the difference in exchange. We've already kind of highlighted a couple containers for you to do on a map. So maybe I'll just stop here, Christine, and see if you want to add anything and if there's any questions. And at this point, maybe it would be good to go to the social system map, community practice map.
Okay. Just thought an example that just popped into my mind as you were talking about exchanges and there being too few or too many is a thing that's important to think about in any organization, but especially in networks, is if, like if you've got a hub and all information or decision making has to go through that central person, that really slows things down and it really kills the energy of activity, so that you want to be looking at how can we just let more information be going directly from person to person as opposed to always going through the hub. So that was just popped into my head, so I thought I'd add that. And now I'll go to the, so this is the map of this social system that is forming around social system mapping. This is, Lisa, did you just want me to like, so this is the directory view. I'm not going to talk about the views a whole lot, but
yeah, and maybe give time for people who can to open the map on yourself. Also want to invite those of you who are familiar with HSD and our practitioners out there, if you want to add to anything I just said or add explanation, I'd really welcome that. And you can either do it in the chat or you can also just unmute and join in.
And also you are welcome, all of you are welcome to be on this map as well. Kara, if you could put the link, the opt-in form link into the chat as well. But what Lisa was just referring to is Kara put the link to this map in the chat, starts https://embed.kumu.io. That's what we're looking at on my screen right now. But if you want to dig in on your own, which would be helpful, feel free to open that up as well. And then we'll go through it. But Lisa, I'm sorry, I know we talked about this. What did you want me to just sort of show the
I would just give a quick view of just a couple of the,
okay.
A quick overview of a couple of the views, because what we're going to do is just ask you to go and look at some of the differences and exchanges on this map, but it might be helpful for you to just get a little grounded about the map first.
Okay, thanks. So just so you know, these, as I'm going down the side panel, each of these headers is actually a link to a different view. So we have different ways that we slice and dice the data once we've gathered it in sumApp. And so there's just different, so you can, as you go down the side panel, you can click on any of those and see different ways of looking at the data. The other thing to note is that there are filters up here in the upper left of the map canvas that, and these are actually differences in this network, but filters that you can either, in this view we're showcasing, so we're highlighting, but we can also, in other views, we can filter and remove people, remove everybody who doesn't have whatever it is we're interested in. So if we're filtering members, if we're filtering by interests, we can make it so that we're just seeing. Anyway, you can play with that. I'm not terribly oriented myself at the moment, obviously. But go through the link, through the different views, and click on the different filters, and see, you'll be able to see what's going on in there. Lisa.
Also, this is a great place to put a plug in, is that you can join this map if you're not on it already, because it's people who are interested in social system mapping and who want to keep on the learning path with it. So any of you are invited to be on it too. So I think this is enough, because even if you're, depending on where you are and your comfort with looking at the maps, you can still like kind of be watching what happens here and learn from it. So let's look at a couple containers that Christine and I have picked out for you. Because one thing you could, let me just say one thing you could do, we don't have time for that this morning, but you could go and just start brainstorming all the different containers, and that might give you some insight. But we're gonna start by giving you a couple containers and then have you look at the difference in exchange. In SenseMaking, you probably even find more kind of places to think about and interpret and make sense of your map in the differences in exchanges. So we're going to share a table and show you a container, and then have you look at the map and think about that. Think about what the difference in exchanges are. So I might need to get a little bit bigger, just magnify a little bit, Christine, for those who have smaller computers, screens. So the first container, let's look at just individuals. So you saw on that map that it is a map of individuals, and the individuals are, there's different views of them, starting with the directory view, which doesn't have any connections. And I'm curious, as you look at this and just take a few minutes to dig around in the map, what are some of the differences in individuals that you see that are just kind of popping out at you as you take a look at the map? And I'd like you to put those in the chat. And as we do that, we're going to actually add them to the shared screen that you have in front of you too. So go ahead. It might take a minute because people are digging around, but as you start to see them, put them in the chat, and Christine will add them up into this table. So what differences in the individuals, all the kinds of differences you see with individuals?
I'm going to add a caveat, which is in any social system map, the questions that you ask are the questions that are relevant and important for this particular group. So in different maps, you would have different kinds of questions that you've asked. And so those would represent different kinds of differences amongst the individuals. In this particular community, our relationship to mapping and our skill sets and interests with mapping are basically the main differences that matter. So that's why it looks, those are the choices you have. They could be very different in a different context.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to add one into the chat to get us started, but one of the differences on this map is the different levels of interest people have in social system mapping. Some are on the kind of edges thinking, oh, this is interesting, I'll just kind of see what's going on. And some are in it doing social system mapping every day. What others do you see?
So uses people have.
Yep. I would say geographic location is another one. What else do you see here, differences?
The hats that we wear.
Hats, oh, here's some good ones coming here. Interests, so we have that. Different levels of competencies, and different kinds of competencies, I would say, and different professions. That's a good one. Different process maturity, objectives, levels of need for a specific resource. Yeah, the different asks and offers. And there's a lot of differences. There's some similarities and differences in there, right? Similarities can also be interesting to look at. We're focusing on differences, but that is one thing we do in complex systems too, is look at similarities as well and amplify those for change. Time zone, yes. Others, any other differences you're seeing? I'll give you a few more minutes before we move to the exchanges. I see differences in gender.
We have different languages.
Yep, different languages, cultures, different cultures. Do we have just different skills? They fit in some of those other categories. Yeah, differing levels of investment in social system mapping. Yep, differences in age and education. Differences in experience in applying networks. keep adding them if you still have insights into that, but I'm going to shift us to the exchanges and would like you to think about that flow or transfer of trust, information, communication, interactions, connection. What are some exchanges you see between individuals that we could highlight? I see one more difference that just came in, Christine, access to information. So let's switch now to the exchanges.
Just to note, if you're in the view that is called interactions, you can actually click on the links between two people. So any of those lines, if you click on them, the side panel will open and show you information about that relationship or that exchange.
And Christine, while people are thinking about this, there's another good difference that came in, differing levels of support for their social system map work in their professional context.
Yeah.
That's great. Excellent, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what are the exchanges between individuals? They can be positive or negative or neutral.
Well, I'll throw out one: technical information.
Yep. One thing we've noticed in social system mapping is people who wear the different hats, visionary, technical, sense making, sometimes disconnect in communication, have a hard time understanding each other. Here's one that came up, matching of asks and offers. It's great. What other exchanges do you notice in this map? Or you can just also think about your experience in social system mapping, or your experience in these interactions, if you're joining these monthly or weekly calls. Here's another one, acting as a catalyst for connections of people within the network. Exactly. Introductions, it's a great one. Project collaboration, mentoring.
Sharing, I would say showing our maps to each other and sharing experience.
Yeah, that's great. These sumApp calls, actually, using the directory to find someone who has an expertise you want. Peer reviews, great.
Well, project collaboration is, like Lisa helping me do today's session, is an exchange that's happening in the community on behalf of the community. So, but is that project collaboration or is that something else?
I think it doesn't matter. Yeah. I would add it in.
Okay.
The key in this time, when at this stage too, is just brainstorming as much as possible and not worrying about. It's already covered. Sometimes specificity can help. Sometimes the general helps. Sharing tools we build so others can build on them. Cool. Yeah, learning. Exactly. Excellent. You know, let's do this next container and just take a few minutes, and then we're going to go into breakouts. And I'm going to just offer a few questions you can do in breakouts as you look at these differences in exchanges to just see what might help most right now with sense making. So what I'm also hoping this hour does is kind of show you a bit of the process of how you could do this with your network or with a group in your network who might be interested. So principles and goals, let's a different kind of container, right? So the container is principles and goals. What might be the differences we'd see in this map around principles or goals? Let's do some thinking about that. And let's start with the differences. And if you still have insights about the previous container, go ahead, pop that in the chat. But right now we're focusing on what are the differences in principles and goals as a container here for the social system map, community of practice map. Reasons to join, excellent.
I'm thinking what you want to do with what you learn.
Yep. And after you put that in, there's a couple here that are coming up, some good ones here. Those who engage social system mapping as a way to research a space versus those who use it in real-time service of a participant community. Discovering hidden alliances, collecting social map examples, values, desired values contributing to motivation and participation, desired impact. There's like in here assumptions about the world that we bring to it, we bring to social system mapping. Any other differences? I'm thinking about, yeah, go ahead, Christine.
I'm just thinking about there's really different contexts in which people are mapping and learning.
Oh, yeah, yep. Good work. Okay, let's do the exchanges on this one. What are the exchanges? And if you have differences, keep popping that in the chat, we'll add it. Here's the question, aligning social system best practices, or would that be an exchange? Probably aligning would be an exchange. There could be different prioritization. That would be a difference. There might be difference in what you think the best practices are, like different in agreement, but then coming to alignment would be the exchange. Well, good question. And it got us started on the exchanges too, excellent. Think about this map, go dig around. We have about 3 more minutes before I'd like us to get into breakouts. Other exchanges around principles and goals. It might be just goal setting time, right? Goal setting agenda and time. Here we go, great. And exchanging approaches to implementing the social system map within various, right, exactly, excellent. Various contexts, you're seeing this, Christine, in the chat.
Yep.
Okay.
I guess it might be a good question for the breakout rooms, but I thought I will bring it up here, as I was also wondering if maybe you also see that a bit differently. It's just somehow a feeling that I had, because it's so easy to come up with this list within this map. But I wonder, is it, you know, coming from the map itself, or rather from knowing the field?
I know, it's a good question, and it's a little bit enmeshed, because the map is about people who are interested in social system mapping. So you've got kind of a network, you know, a network within a broader network. You have like a part and a whole, and it really doesn't matter. What we'd say in complexity theory is that it really doesn't matter, because the map is about social system, interest in social system mapping. If the network was a different kind of network, then you really would be focused more on the map. Does that make sense?
Somehow, but my question is more like, if I'm just trying to project what I might have to work with. So I will support to do a mapping of the region that I'm not part of, and of the processes that are happening in the, you know, culture, in the mentality that I'm not part of. So there will be other people, I guess, who will be able to sense that better. So maybe like that's just enough. Like if you have enough people who know what they are mapping and they are part of that mapping, I guess that would be helpful. And yes, I completely understand that that's normal to bring different inputs of information that you have available. Like that totally makes sense for me. But I was just more like, as you said, this session is also a possibility to see like how that can work in practice. So that's where the question was coming from. And now by discussing this with you, I thought that indeed, if you just make sure that people who are sense making of the map are part of the mapping, like of that network, then that should work. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to do is I'm offering some ideas of containers and differences and exchanges, but a truly facilitative role would be that role where you invite people to look at the map of their own network and come up with their own answers to these questions. So, you really are in the truly just the full facilitator hat. I'm also part of this map and part of this piece, but as you're talking about that, if you're doing it with a community you're not part of, then really holding that facilitator role and asking these questions. And really just, really the facilitator principle that what emerges is what's the most important right now. And that we do this adaptive action cycle then to say, okay, well, what's something we want to work on now? And then we keep coming back and we keep doing this again because we keep learning new things in this with these open boundaries and system. That was a great question. I think what I'd like to show you is the next step. And that might make a little more sense too with this facilitation question of the process. And the next step, what we would do then with the group and facilitate this and us just doing this together is we'd step back and say, now as we look at these differences and exchanges, what's really jumping out at us? So Christine, what I'm hoping we can do is show the slide. And I don't know if there's a way to put this in the breakout room so we can be looking at these differences and exchanges. I didn't think through that when we were thinking about the process, but we could just maybe cut and paste them into the chat because you can still see the chat when you go into breakouts.
How about if I'll really quickly, I'm going to do a screen cap and stick it in a Google Doc and put the link to the Google Doc into the chat.
Okay, and then in the meantime, if you could put up the slideshow with the adaptive action questions.
1 second.
While you do that. Yep. Great, thanks.
Yep.
So we really don't have a lot of time for this, but I'll give you maybe I'm hoping we can have 7 minutes in the breakouts where you can just have a little time with a smaller group. As you look at these two containers, individuals and principles and goals, and you saw the differences in exchanges, then the next thing you would do is say, so what is this telling you about your network? Or what do basically it's like, what is most present for you? What's most jumping out for you right now? And what's one thing you want to go test as a result of that? And then with an adaptive action, and we're always doing that cycle, we can't make this whole great plan because it's an open self-organizing system. But what we're trying to do is understand some of the differences and exchanges, and we can help that along and try it and then come back to the next adaptive action cycle. And so just want you to practice that a little bit as you step back now and look at those differences and exchanges. What would you say for our community of practice? What would you say is, oh, this is really the one that we think has most energy behind it and we want to try something with that. So just give you a sense of how that looks. So Christine, why don't you go ahead and we'll go into breakouts now, and then we'll just put at least a 1-minute warning when we're coming back in, and we'll have a little bit of wrap up time. Welcome back, everybody. So I'm just going to go to gallery view so we can see people. We don't have a lot of time. I'm going to invite you in chat to just put any insights you're having as you did that kind of reflection. I want to just highlight a couple things as you do that. Put in your insights. And one is Christine and I were reflecting on how Christine, I think I'm going to let you say this as the expert. Is that all right?
Okay. So I was just, one thing I was wanting to say to Ola's question about, is what we're putting in the differences in the exchanges that we were putting in that table, is that coming from field expertise or is that coming from actually looking at the map? And what I was going to say was, actually, I have the most field expertise of anybody, especially as anybody in this webinar today. And a lot of you are brand new to this, but I was seeing dimensions of difference in exchanges that I either so deeply assume that I don't even make conscious and list, or that I just don't think about because I'm so familiar with the field. So actually, lack of familiarity and new eyes and, you know, beginner's mind and all that kind of fun stuff actually brought, I was like, I never think of that. So it was actually quite helpful for me as a field expert to have a different set of eyes. And a lot of it, well, I'll stop there. Go ahead, Lisa.
Great. I'd love to hear, I think we can do this just with voice, but if you're more comfortable, put it in chat. But if you have some voice that you're willing to just share some insights before we wrap up, go ahead and unmute yourselves and just speak into the room.
Jose.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Jose Juan. I think for me, anytime we talk about systems mapping for my organization, it's really acknowledging the power and privilege all of us gatekeepers are to our various systems of help or otherwise. And so that's the baseline that we operate from, which can also lead to very challenging conversations around internalized oppression or externalized racism and all of those things. So that's the baseline from our operation. And then we kind of, from floor to ceiling, kind of operate that way. And it often comes around language access issues, how the person gender expresses and so on. So that's where we usually come.
That's great. Christine, do you have anything to add with that?
Well, just technical access is a huge one. I mean, is a very huge basic one. So I'm noticing that we're at the top of the hour.
Okay.
So I think what we'll do is to respect everybody's time. If you want to stick around and dig more deeply, you're welcome. But what we like to do at the end is all of us unmute, and I will count down once you're all unmuted, and then we'll just all say our thank you and greetings for the rest of the day or the evening or whatever it is. So let's all unmute. You don't have to, obviously, if you don't want to, or if your sound isn't working, but I invite you to unmute. And as soon as we're all ready, I will count down. And 3, 2, 1.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everybody.
So
Bye.
good to
Thank you
see
very much.
Everyone.
Care.
Goodbye.
Onward.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And then while people are jumping off, just stick around if you still want to talk.